much for coming. This was really amazing. Are you staying?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay, maybe then, but thank you so much. So cool. Very good talk. Everything recorded. Yeah? Good job. Sehr gut. So. Ja? Kamera? Hello, hello. Das ist eigentlich, wie ist das mit der Zeit? Hier hat wann hat die normale Anfangszeit?
Ich glaube, nee, 16:45, vor 10 Minuten. Ja.
Ist es in 10 Minuten?
Vor 10 Minuten, ja.
Ach, vor 10 Minuten schon?
Ja.
Okay, perfekt. Hello. Okay, we are starting. So everybody that wants to sit here can take a place, and everybody that wants to stand or eat, it's also okay. I wanted to say a cordially welcome to everybody here for the next iteration of the Wellbeing Culture Forum that is happening this time in this beautiful space, physically, I have to say. It's at St. Agnes, the place where the König Gallery is, and it's also a cooperation with the König Gallery and St. Agnes. We are very thankful for this opportunity. We are co-producing these talks as a part of our Wellbeing Culture series. It's now the third day consecutive that we are doing this. We started with our mission talks on Friday under the title "From Breaking Bauhaus to Growing Gaia." The idea behind this is that when COVID-19 hit the planet, the cities, everything went into lockdown. We basically decided to gather experts, friends, scientists, artists, curators, cultural workers, architects, designers from all over the world, and together with the Design platform, we created the Wellbeing Culture Forum to think about the reason for the lockdowns and the reason for the situation that we all found ourselves in. We started this Wellbeing Culture Forum as an online platform, and now we are doing it the very first time physically. But most of our viewers now over Design, over the different channels of our partners, are watching these talks online. So it's a merge of different realities that we are testing out here. And what we are also testing out is how the future can be developed, because what we learned through COVID, I mean, we learned a lot of lessons. One of the lessons that we definitely learned is that if we continue to organize our cities in the way how we did it, we probably won't have to worry too much about climate change, because we will extinct ourselves already before the effects of climate change, because basically our culture created a monoculture of human bodies within cities, where Berlin is I think, extremely nice exemption. Berlin is a very green city, but if you look into cities like New York, we look into cities like London, partly, especially in the underprivileged neighborhoods, we see that there is a lack of nature. Nature became a kind of decoration only. Our bodies live in the illusion that we can be the only left part of nature in a completely artificial environment. And now we see, everywhere popping up, like mushrooms actually, this kind of new take on the reunion of human architecture and nature. And we have now the Back to Earth program at the Martin-Gropius-Bau that is highlighting this amazing theory of Lynn Margulis and James Lovelock that sees our planet as one living organism, Gaia. This is the Gaia hypothesis, and is trying to reunite our cultural design with the intelligent design actually that we find in nature. And there's so many topics we were discussing because they are all interconnected, how our culture has to develop. We just finished an amazing talk about critical culture that was addressing the racial and social injustices that are now topic also in our cities all over the world. Before we talked about other topics that are connecting culture with the innovation that we are lacking, and now also with Berlin. There's one example that Berlin has that is also connected with this place, with Arne Brandelhuber, the architect behind the renovation of this building. And this is the Moiser Bunker. And the Moiser Bunker is a project that was proposed by Johann König and Arne Brandelhuber to be restored and not taken down as a new center for art and creativity and cohabitation. And this is one of these innovation elements that Berlin is actually producing. Yeah, I'm extremely happy that we will discuss these topics and other topics related to Berlin as our innovation metropolis with this broad panel of people. And first and foremost, I want to introduce my co-moderator, Federico Von Bruhl, that will give us more insights into the topic, and then we will introduce the panelists. Thank you so much for being here, and
Thanks.
the stage is yours.
Hello, can you all hear me? Excellent. So hi everyone, welcome from my side as well. It's a great pleasure to be moderating this panel together with Nikolai Sekutovic and discussing with this impressive line of speakers and panelists lined up here. My name is Federico Von Bruhl. I'm an art lawyer, in fact, and a partner at K&L Gates. Well, I've spent the past 12 years, in fact, in Berlin. Years of change in Berlin, and I also do remember the Berlin of the 1990s. Many of our panelists here have already lived in Berlin in the 1990s. And I think if we reflect today about what Berlin is about as a city of culture and a cultural leader maybe in the world, we cannot possibly reflect upon this without thinking also and considering also the uniqueness of Berlin in its role in the history of this country and in the history of the world. So the divided city with the wall and being in a way the epicenter of the division of the world between East and West. And then after the fall of the wall, turning into something new, turning into a place that left room for experiments, that left room for visions, visions of in art and visions in architecture. And this sense of Berlin being a laboratory was a feeling that was very specific for the 1990s, and we all remember the Tacheles in the 1990s, which was maybe a symbol for this feeling of experiment, this feeling of anarchy, of freedom in Berlin, and a place where culture took over, and where culture took over in a way that was not hiding in a white cube or being inaccessible for people, but really culture shaping life and changing life and leaving room for ways to test different forms of life and different forms of living culture. And you can still experience this feeling in Berlin today in many ways and in many places. Think of walking across the Tempelhofer Feld on a Sunday afternoon. Think of going to the Berghain these days and now seeing it not a place for music and dance, but seeing it as an exhibition place all of a sudden. And you can also feel this in a place like here, St. Agnes Church. Yeah, a place that has been a church not long ago, a place where people were looking for the absolute in faith, and now it's about art. It's a place where art is also about looking for the absolute. And this way of changing cultural functions of buildings is something that I believe is very specific about Berlin, and that will be very fundamental to our panel today. So, this being said, we are certainly all aware that Berlin has changed. Of course, gentrification does not stop at Berlin. Many places that have been laboratories 20 years ago are now institutionalized. Places like CO Berlin or KW, and then you have developments in Berlin that have also changed the creative world, like, for example, rents increasing and things getting more expensive in this city that has always been so open for anyone who was creative and ready to contribute to the cultural life here. And there was a headline of the 2014 New York Times article that said, called Berlin, Brooklyn on the Spree. And it spoke of a certain Berlin fatigue. I'm not sure whether there is anything such as a Berlin fatigue, but what I'm very sure about is that many questions have been rising in this city, questions that have been rising in other cities as well. And Berlin having this unique history of having been a laboratory of creativeness and culture over the last 30 years is maybe a place where we can find answers and look together for answers to these questions that have been rising. And if you narrow it down to three very seemingly easy and yet fundamental questions, we would like to speak today about Berlin with the three questions: where do we come from? Where are we now? The David Bowie song. And where do we go to? And with this, I would like to hand back to Mikołaj Sikutovic, who will now introduce our speakers and kick off our conversation. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Federica. Thank you so much for everybody being here. I wanted to basically give the ball to the speakers, so every speaker can introduce himself, herself in a short sentence, and also answer a question related to the article of Kimberly Bradley that was published August 12, 2020 in the New York Times, saying Berlin's art scene, are reports of its death exaggerated? Is it exaggerated, or do you see here a vital art scene, and how your own practice is relating to the creative sector in Berlin? Maybe if you could start, Moritz von Dülmen.
Yeah, hi, I'm Moritz von Dülmen. Thank you for the invitation. I'm CEO of Kulturprojekte Berlin. This is actually a city-owned company, a non-profit company, and we are responsible actually for the Berlin Art Week and other nice cooperation projects in Berlin, like the Long Life of Museum, or in 2 weeks we start with a European Month of Photography and other big events in the last 15 years here for or in behalf of the city of Berlin.
Yes, is the art scene death, or is it still alive?
Still alive.
Thank you.
My name is Joram Roth. I am the chairman of Fotografiska, which is a photo museum that will be opening in Berlin in 2022. I also own a place called Klärchens Ballhaus, where we do dance and food. And I own a magazine called Tip, which covers the cultural ongoings in Berlin. And as far as the New York Times goes, for those of us who worry about what the New York Times thinks, as long as the New York Times is writing about Berlin, Berlin is doing very, very well.
Thank you very much. Constanza Macras.
Hi, I'm Constanza Macras. I'm a director, choreographer. I work in Berlin. I live and work in Berlin since the 90s, actually. I came to work as a dancer when I used to be a dancer. Concerning the death, I don't know. I mean, I must say I experienced this amazing 90s, and there was a reason why I stayed in Berlin, because when I came to Europe, I was first living in Amsterdam, and I promised never to live in Germany, sorry, but I mean, after I was in Frankfurt. And I saw Berlin and I fell in love, and I felt like, okay, this is a city that I really think that something great is gonna happen. I also was conscious at that time that in 15 years it will look really different and probably will be dead. Already back then you felt that, you know, say, okay, when the cranes are gone from Potsdamer Platz, and maybe it's all gonna be very different. I don't know, it changed, you know, I mean, we also, I mean, now I'm like, and I came here as a 25-year-old and I'm 50 now, you know, so I mean, there's a lot of young people behind me. So, they probably have a different idea. I think cities are very, very dynamic organisms, and they mutate. And I think as an art maker, I still find it quite vibrant. I have moments that I really doubted, actually, and I wanted to go anywhere else. I thought I started to lose interest, but now I feel again that it does have a lot to offer still. And I think it depends also on how this gentrification takes place. That is not becoming like this anonymous city like any other city in the world, like including New York, because New York and Berlin, they have the same buildings. I mean, I don't know, there's like some stereotypical things that happen in every city who has been bought by investor groups, and then it looks all the same, basically. So if we manage to actually understand the process, which is inevitable, and do something with it, and listen to, and leave some space for this youth that luckily is like not getting distracted, in the internet, then I think we'll be doing fine. I was coming from Düsseldorf right now, so I'm very optimistic.
Oh, that's interesting. I had just a conversation with one of the panelists from the last panel that said, I don't want to compare it to Düsseldorf because this is,
No, you can't.
like as an example. Adriane?
I'm Adrienne Göhler. I'm a curator and an author, and I hate silos. I also hate the art silo, and I think as we are also part of the problem and not only of the solution, because art, of course, is one of the motors of the gentrification as well. This is a very good example, and we have a lot of examples. We need new alliances, and I don't think that we should just continue like we did before. And I stick still to the idea that the capital needs to be a laboratory, but not only an art laboratory. This is also boring. It is a laboratory between different forms of existence, and that is our duty, I think. And we have no place, no guaranteed place in the liquid modernity. This is an old sentence from Zygmunt Bauman, but more and more it's true because we don't have our cinemas. What are we doing with them? I mean, that is a big feeling, a big new wave that is going through our minds and bodies, and I think we have to find new solutions, new forms of funding and collaborations.
I'm Freya Meyer. I'm director of Forecast, which is an international mentorship program for all kinds of creatives, artists, whatever they do. And parallelly to Forecast, I also direct Driving the Human, which is a collaboration of Forecast with ZKM in Karlsruhe, Hochschule für Gestaltung in Karlsruhe, and the ACATEC, the National Academy for Science and Technology. And there we deal with the question of the human habitat called Earth, based on the discourse of the Gaia hypothesis and also on Bruno Latour's notion of critical zones. So the few meters above and under the Earth crumb. Berlin, I think, is very resilient, and also the artists, wherever they live, are resilient. And so I would say that maybe Berlin is kind of a model or example for survival of artists as well. And they do and have and will.
Hi, it's okay? Yes. Hi, my name is Andin Mo. I'm editor-in-chief of the magazine Art Plus, which is focused on architectural and urbanistic discourse. And speaking about Berlin, we had the chance to curate an exhibition last year on the occasion of the 30th anniversary of the fall of the wall, also supported by the Senate. And what we were interested in is how to overcome this notion of the art scene is a gentrificator and is the art scene death or not. But what we were interested in was to look at the driving forces behind these developments. And I think it's also too easy to take the blame, like that the creative industries and sector is so to say, the bad guy in this equation. we rather looked at the figures. Why are the prices up? Why have they gone up over the last 30 years? And what we found out was that the Senate of Berlin privatized 20 million square meters of the urban surface. So if you do this, and this is just to give you an image of the extent, this is the surface of Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg. So if you privatize an entire city district, of course this has an economic impact on the prices and the economy of the city. So I think rather than just blaming ourselves, we have to look into how to change the politics and how to deal with the undercurrents of, what we call the creativity. Because just one last sentence, the creativity as a concept has once been introduced by the avant-garde as a means to overcome the functional society. But today, creativity has itself become functionalized as an economic variable in the equation. So we have to be really careful to talk about creativity and creative city and so on, and to be more specific. Thank you.
Uli, it's you and the tree, because you are sitting on the place with the
I like
tree.
it, sort
so
of
the
like
tree
it,
will
right.
touch you all the time.
So I'm Uli Seibert. I think I should introduce myself.
Please.
So I'm a university teacher. I'm an investor. I have a private art collection, also taking part at Art Week. Thank you. We opened our house. Well, I do it just for fun. It's not a serious collection. It's just fun. And I copied Joram.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's always a good idea. So we bought Ballhaus Ost, which is also a nice location for theater, just to save it, not to squeeze out the last penny. So, and what more? Oh, so many more things. Oh yes, I'm also engaged in the Holzmarkt group, which is Kater Blau and Seelchen and so on. I'm in the supervisory board, and I think these people are really worthwhile to give them good advice and help them, because they have so much trouble. And now to the question, is the culture in Berlin dead? Or a short statement, I think I should give. Yeah. So of course not, because the people are still here. Look at all these young people here from all over the world. I mean, they're struggling, they're suffering, but they are still here, and they're doing everything, wonderful creative things, and they're trying to get moved, and this will not go away like this. So and the rest later on.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you for sharing this. Let's follow up on something that came up in several of your comments. The city of New York is a place that is often a comparative factor for Berlin. And I would like to point out the T-shirt that Joram is wearing. I love. Could you show the full T-shirt,
so
please?
to be clear, the T-shirt is a work by an artist called Igor Pasch, who recontextualizes logos, and so he made a shirt. And so I'm trying to do the microphone. It says "I love Savini-Platz." So even though I have a very American accent, I'm actually Charlottenburger, and which means a whole other thing in Berlin. But he made this shirt, and I love it.
So let's think about Berlin and let's think about New York. And I think you have said that we should make sure that Berlin does not become exactly like New York.
But I have to say something about New York and Berlin.
No, yeah.
We want to compare, because I mean,
but it's interesting to look at the two cities in comparison, because Berlin has started much later than New York to become a room for experience for art. So if you think of this laboratory that we have had here in Berlin, if you wish, for the past 30 years after the fall of the wall, what do you think are specific thoughts or concepts that have been developed in Berlin that can become an example that can have leadership, thought leadership worldwide.
All of us, no?
It's to all of you. Maybe to the one wearing the T-shirt
Well, I mean,
first.
honestly, I find the constant comparison to New York tiresome. I think New York is super boring. I know a lot of people are like, oh, New York's so spannend, they can't wait to go on vacation there and so on. It's nothing but bankers and lawyers, and I think New York's going to take a big hit now because of Corona. And so I think the city will get younger as sort of middle-aged people move out, because living there with small kids is insane. But there was a moment in New York in the 70s that we all celebrate. And it was crazy fun, and it was even crazy fun in the 80s. But that was it. That was a moment. And that is done. And so New York, everybody talks about New York. Nobody makes art in New York. People buy and sell art in New York, but who cares? You know, seriously, who cares? If you want to talk about big cities, talk to me about Shanghai or Seoul. New York, New York, New York, who cares? I think Berlin is infinitely more interesting. We also don't have a big finance industry, so those people are not about to come here and take that. I think where we have to be very careful is in making sure that Corona wasn't our Hurricane Katrina and washes away all the freischaffende Künstler and Kulturschaffende and all the independent artists and people who contribute to culture. So I think if we have a mission, it is making sure that those people continue to find a place in Berlin.
And concerning, for me, I mean, I used to live, when I moved to Berlin, I was still living between Berlin and New York for 7 years. For personal reasons, I have my personal life there and my work here. Whatever I had, personal life I had when I was 20-something. But, for me, it was like, I was very clear that I didn't want to live in New York because it was impossible to create and to really,
It's funny, we are talking now with the...
Pasa, vení, entra, dale. Okay, whatever. Okay, no, it was, I mean, when I figured when I was between Berlin and New York that I didn't want to move to New York completely when my partner was there, because I would never make a career in New York as a choreographer. That was clear, you know, already in the 90s, because it was impossible to get a venue, a decent venue to work without money. And here, you could work in Sophienstelle, you could work in Halle Shanoufa, and they were already well-equipped venues. You had technicians, you have, like, even if you have no funding, you could produce professional work and start to, you know, grow into your profession. And that was impossible back then. I mean, because the funding was dead. So it was very important, you know, to keep one of the ways to keep art, you know, I think is keep founding them, keep having space also for younger people, because at that time I could grow because there was all these venues which are accessible to people who didn't have a career behind them, in order to actually do something. I mean, I realize that now for Berlin it's getting more and more difficult for some people to get into venues that I got when I was 20. You know, this is happening already, you know, that they need much more behind them than I used to, that I had at the time. Also, what is, on the other hand, comparing to New York, I mean, I didn't find the art of the dancing very interesting in the 90s, and neither I find it so much now, but diversity is something that is much more addressed. You know, and I think Berlin is very, very behind in that area. Berlin still struggling to not be so white in some ways, you know. I mean, and also to accept also foreigners. I say it as a South American woman working in the city for 25 years. You know, I still struggle with many things because of that, and so I think we need to come up to speed. You know, with multiculturalism, it's in everybody's mouth, but it's not in everybody's head. You know, and it's also not in everybody's practice in some way. Or understanding, actually, or sensitivity. This is something that, you know, there should be really more. Berlin needs a little bit more to come up to speed. You know, in this comparison that, you know, we were just talking.
So I also think that now in times of COVID-19, Berlin showed that actually this slogan, arm aber sexy, can also mean that it's much more resilient, because sometimes poorness is more resilient than richness for a city, for a structure, you know, because in New York, basically a lot of the social networks, they just moved out of the city to the Hamptons, yeah, and New York was some kind abandoned. Well, here the quality of life is much higher than in New York. If you don't live next to the Central Park in New York, you basically are living always far away from green spaces. Well, there's green spaces here in Berlin, and it's not only parks, it's also the green spaces that are just left green because it's not yet built on. And I think this is something that I would like you to relate to, how important it is for a city not to be ready and not to be basically constructed.
Yes, I'm very hesitant to take Woverett's slogan that seriously, because if we looked at the slogan carefully in retrospective, it has been the beginning of a really serious transformation of the city by co-opting and instrumentalizing culture, subculture especially, counterculture, as part of the myth of Berlin. And that would be okay if that's just cultural politics, but the counterpart of this cultural politics was the neoliberal transformation of Berlin, the privatization I was talking about, the austerity measures for the public infrastructure. So in this sense, this casual slogan, poor but sexy, has big consequences for our lives today in Berlin. And in this sense, I would say if we really want to change anything, or rather to keep Berlin from changing in the wrong direction, we have to look at the economy and the politics which is behind this kind of slogans. And but to come back to your question of the unfinishedness of Berlin, which of course has especially a consequence for the quality of the city. Because it is here in Berlin in the 80s where a new thinking about urban nature arose, in the sense that people were looking around them in the rumbles and the unbuilt spaces and discovered that the so-called rural vegetation, so the sideway vegetation, is part of an ecology of the city. And from this moment on, the entire way of looking at the city changed. So that is what we can connect to today in the sense you talked about in the beginning with the Gaia, which I'm not so happy with talking about, because it somehow has always this kind of esoteric connotation. But what we are doing at the moment as the next research project is to look at Berlin as a case study for the cohabitation of human, non-human species. And this is much more concrete, and making people aware that their environment is part of a wider context. And by taking the non-human species seriously as agents of the urban environment, we can also overcome our anthropologists' thinking of the city only to serve our interests, only to serve the interests of capital. And so this is another way of looking at the city we are trying to do at the moment.
That's super interesting. Thank you for sharing this. So let me pick up on this. So this cohabitation of man and nature, this strategies of sustainability, of generating a new kind of urban living. And now looking again at what you stressed, that we also have to, when thinking of the economy and the role that economy plays in this. Is it Berlin specific, and can we keep it as Berlin specific, that we continue to place sustainability and creativity above commercial values in this city. Think about, let me give you 2 examples. Let's think about how Google arrived here in Berlin, imagining to opening its Berlin entity, and Google was surprised to be welcomed with being thrown at it with dirt.
That's a parallel to New York, actually, with Amazon.
And then also Tesla, more recent now. Tesla being welcomed not far away from Berlin, being also surprised to be welcomed in a different manner than other places would welcome a large investor. Let me hear your thoughts on this, on how we can remain or continue to strive for being a city where values like sustainability and creativity are governing. Moritz, you have said only a very short introductory statement. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's always very hard to compare Berlin with other cities because it's so a special situation we have in Berlin. Actually, this is our it's our basis. If you are concerning and looking on Berlin, what is happening not only in the last 30 years, maybe in the last 100 years, we have so many breaks, so many catastrophes, so many problems, and actually Berlin always reinvent itself and starting new. So this is the power, and then looking on the development in the last 20 years, actually we should be very lucky that we don't have so much money in the city, because if you imagine that we would have enough money in the 90s, and then we built our city and it would be ready now, and how boring it would be. So actually, I think the best concept in Berlin was always it's actually a city without steering. Actually, it's a small, living, chaotic paradise, and it's always actually like the dream of America. It's a place where you have always the opportunities to do everything what you want, and this is I think this is the reason why it is a place to be. It is still the place to be for the people. So actually, I'm looking not so skeptic to the next year, to the future. Of course, we have a big movement and gentrification, but actually, if you compare it to so many other cities, and we are talking about compared to New York or Barcelona or something like that, and also when you look in the politics, it could be better. But actually, if you see all the debates, I think all the people in the society as well as the politics thinking about it, they know it now. So that is a reason, because I'm looking a little bit more optimistic, maybe than you.
Adriana, you in a second, because you raised your hand. And
yeah. I'm not marketing that city, and I'm also not sure if that can be the marketing. I'm sitting quite in a complicated situation. I'm in the board of trustees of Tempelhof, which is the second biggest building in the world, and the politics consider it like another problem we have, and another thing that another airport that is really a mess. So that is really a catastrophe, because there is no idea of it. It is a city. It is whole. I mean, it's the biggest building in Europe. You can imagine. It is not a building. It is like a Stadtteil, like a neighborhood, and to construct or to think that only as an art place would also be boring. So we need to find, again, new coalitions or alliances or networks in bringing together these. You know, the biggest and the most beautiful place in Berlin is an art-free place. It's Tempelhofer Feld. Nobody wants to have their art, and I like it. I love it. You know, it is. I mean, there were a lot of attempts of politicians to say, we we could make a little art piece there and there and there and there. No, people said, no, just leave us alone. No, and we also don't want to have park benches. We just want nothing, the void, as a possibility, because we have too much art. Also, I think, I'm sorry, we have too much cars, we have too much of a lot of things, and we also have too much art, because we need, that is also because we have a completely stupid funding system. So we need, everybody needs to pretend that he or she is inventing the latest hot shit in the world, what was never seen. Of course it's stupid. But because you are not funded because you have an idea and you want to reframe it and you want to think it over, no, there's no money. So we have to produce and produce and produce. And this is sick. So I try to find an idea of what could we really do in Tempelhof. Just to give you a little idea, the Social Democrats would like to have more Büroflächen, offices, places, and also a bit more of police, maybe. There, right? The police is already there, but it could also be double police. So, and what do we do with the hunger? I would like to have the creativity in the city. What can we do with these monsters? And maybe we have another idea due to Corona, because now the monster hangars maybe are the places we can go in winter. So that is a creativity. I would like to put that in that building and to find a new idea of whole. I mean, it has an ecological dimension. It has an, of course, economical dimension, because it is bankrupt. I mean, the fascists did really bad work. This you have to say. So that is a challenge, and that is a unique moment in the. So you don't have to compare it with New York. It is just an outstanding example, which would need a lot of care from a lot of people, which is not done yet.
May I just answer Moritz von Bruhl?
Everybody please just talk. Yeah.
Because sometimes criticality is mistaken with pessimism. And obviously, I'm quite optimistic if we want to look at the theme of cohabitation, which can be a case study in Berlin for other metropolis around the world. But what I tried to make a case for was the question of ownership of public land and accessibility is the key to the question of creativity and accessibility in the city. And this question has been discussed widely in the last 10, 15 years due to the fact that this kind of critical researches have been done. And if we look at the figures, 20 million square meters have been sold in 30 years. Berlin still has around 17 million square meters left. So the first thing we have to do, and which has been done, was to reverse the privatization politics and to stop it. This has been done, and the next step is to build up a public land fund.
Dude, I'm sorry.
Foundation.
Berlin has more parks than any other city in this size in the world. What are you freaked out about? With all due respect, we have so many parks.
That's
and
not
the city
question.
Sold off the real estate because it was bankrupt, not because it was some kind of political
No,
ploy.
you know, 5 billion have been the money which Berlin got from this.
Oh, they spent it poorly, no question, but it had to be sold at that time.
So don't tell me about economy from this side, because what they got over 30 years from 20 million square meters was 5 billion. And only just
But they
take the
didn't sell
figure,
parks, they sold
they
buildings.
spent like 6.5 billion on a new airport. So just to show the relationship. So what I mean is we have to keep this public access in order to keep the creativity in Berlin. That's the main point, I would say. And Tempelhof is, of course, one of these main cases where we can find other way of reusing, adapting public assets and not just sell it out.
So Uli mentioned Holzmarkt, and I will want to give you the word in a second. I just want to say that I participated in an amazing privatization project when I was 20. It was actually not privatization. It was basically taking something that was private into other private hands. It was the Hafenstraße in Hamburg. So it's a very central at the Hamburg Harbor located project. When I was a punk, we were basically having our band playing there and rehearsing there, and also living there. And this is a project that in the 80s, as you know, was taken over because investors bought it from the city, and they wanted to do high-level apartments. So the punks and anarchists took it over, and then privatized it. Yeah, because basically this is also privatization. I think I have a sorry, I have a sorry. Yeah, but this is even a Genossenschaft, in my opinion, is a form of privatization. So just what I want to say is that maybe we are just thinking too binary, because we can only think in either it's public, and then we have a public administration on it that is very often not really efficient and maybe not even for the best for the public good, or it's private and then it's office, or it's or it's a shopping mall. It's a very stupid way just to divide the world in exactly two possible solutions. I think there's a lot in between, and this is how I want to introduce your comments, Uli.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I hit what you expect. But I wanted to come back to your critics of Berlin's arm aber sexy. So, and it's definitely poor. So we have so much debt, and it's an illusion that the city can do anything or move a lot around. So it's better to be arm aber sexy than be just arm. Huh? So that's so, and this is also a good thing. So compared to New York, if you have an apartment in New York, the painting in the entrance should have at least the value of the whole apartment. So you should have a Roscoe or a Warhol or something. So I want to say, in many cities, in many capitals and big cities in this world, you are judged by money. Totally judged by money. And if you haven't any, you're completely thin air. But here in Berlin, you're not judged by money. You're judged by whether you look good looking, you're creative, you're witty, you're fun. So, and that is a wonderful advantage of Berlin. So look at all these other cities like Hamburg, Florence, Rome, Paris, London. And they have closed societies, and you're judged by money. And this is not yet the case in Berlin. Now that's a great advantage of this town, and that's why I love to be here. And so, okay, we are poor. That's it. And can't help it.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt the discourse, but I would like to get back to we have too much art. Are you serious about that? Is anybody serious about this idea? Does anybody agree? I don't. I mean, that's what artists do. They produce, and they have to. They can't do anything else. Artists are produced. Oh, interesting.
You have
so
to
they
speak
don't
in
really
the microphone,
exist
otherwise
there.
our online guests cannot hear your comments.
Okay.
If I may add one thing, I think there's sometimes we find ourselves in a tone of condescension about artists, where they are these helpless creatures that must be protected and nurtured, and without that they wouldn't be. I think there's such a thing as a cultural entrepreneurialism of people who just want to make art, and they will make art. there's this vision that artists have often of themselves, of that, like they're going to work under the attic like Toulouse-Lautrec, and someone will come and discover them and then take care of their career for them. And there's a lot of artists who genuinely hustle and care and want to be out there and tell their own story and do the work, and they're going to figure out a way. I think we need to create that environment to make that easier, because again, if I come back to some of these other cities where that's been totally taken away, that's why I love Berlin and I'm very proud of it, and we need to make sure we give that runway. But to a lot of people, artists can exist without your help.
Is it for you maybe rather about these art pieces that stay for decades, like these things on Kurfürstendamm and so, that somebody did in the 1980s and we still have to look at?
This is one form of the problem, but you also, I mean, we have a lot of forms of which are quite problematic, and I'm the last who takes artists as the little species I have to, I don't know, to protect. I was curator of the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds for quite a long time, and I'm criticizing the way we fund it. I'm criticizing the way that people has to produce and to produce, to be shown and to be seen, and that is the problem. This is insane, really. I mean, and that makes me feeling that art becomes a substitute for. I mean, the products. You know, it's not. I don't say art should be immaterial and only concepts and only thinking and only society. But I would like to have a different form that also respects that you need time for doing art. And it's not only the Hauptstadt Kulturfonds who has im Frühling und im Herbst, and you have to be like, you have to apply, and if you don't apply, I would like to have other forms, of course. And I mean, it is also not a secret, at least not for some people here, that I'm very much also in basic income ideas, because I think that could help to make a society different. I think we could have less contradiction between sustainability and art. And I also think we could decelerate a bit, which would help us a lot. I mean, also people, that was also, I think, an idea after Corona, or with Corona, to say, no, I don't want to be in this hamster wheel all the time.
That's why you developed it.
Pardon me?
That was your idea for developing it, the virus.
Oh, do you think I'm... well, I'm maybe not as important, but I think it could be... So I would like the capital, the laboratory city, Berlin, as a laboratory. I would like to develop more radical solutions than saying, art is very important, and yes, art is not dead. Oh no, art is really alive, and it is very important to have that in the city. That is maybe not the moment of, I think we need serious new concepts, honestly.
I agree. I just want to make a note on what Adrian was saying about the productivity of the artist. As being an artist myself who has to produce all the time. And it is also like, we are like, more and more happens that, you know, if you're invited to do something, people want to have another work, you know, so you have to like produce. And that's why I think it's also like there is so much about theater. I mean, I can talk about theater, because theaters are producing a piece a month, you know, and people is taking, I don't know, from the drawer, Ibsen and Shakespeare, and they keep on doing the same things forever, which is like, okay, we, you know, like maybe there's also, it would be better that they don't make pieces every month, you know, like, I mean, that they have like a premiere every 3 months or 2 months, you know, and they have more time to actually look at things which are relevant for us right now, which open a discussion that is important. And it's not like, okay, we have 5 minutes, we have to all come out with the COVID-19 concept, which is what happens to us as artists. We all have to have the amazing idea of how we're going to solve this thing, and is this going to change in society? Is it like, are we going to go back to reality or not? You know, this kind of like completely foamy things that happen, you know, because also like the discussions in the internet and all like this, they were so fast, this idea that we're going to change everything, you know, and what did we change? Nothing, you know, like this is not true. We're not going to make a change because of a virus, a pandemic in 6 months. It's not going to happen. what happens is that people is running, trying to get all these foundings, which are created by surplus, so the money has to be spent this year, and this is the truth. It's not because of the COVID, it's because the money was not expended, you know, and this is the thing. And also, like, I'm not, for example, as an artist who's not a fragile thing who has to be taken care of, because I took care of myself pretty good in the last years, you know, and I feel like, you know, and I'm very, very, like, self-sufficient, and I, you know, and I have, thank God, like, this, they like to apply to have how should I go to France? When Adriana was there. No, but, you know, in the time, I mean, now, how these subsidies are shaped, they're changing in a way that they ask you for more productivity. They're worse and worse for the artist. You know, before you had a good co-production. You had people putting money and trusting you, and time to develop. You know, and now you're like, okay, you know, we have to include 5 shows in this subsidy. It's becoming so technical and so bureaucratic, and so the artists have to really figure out, you know, to be like financiers at the same time. You know, which I don't think is bad, but you know, I think it's like it's taking so much out from what it's supposed to be, for the conversation that art's supposed to be, especially when you make live arts also, you know, that, and this is really, yeah, we don't need that much in that sense.
Yeah, couldn't we use this night for designing exactly the way how the city of Berlin, like the Senate, Klaus Reda, whoever, should redesign their way of funding or supporting or building up a nourishing ground for the arts? Couldn't we do that tonight? Because also you, Adrian, said something similar. We need a completely different approach and different funding structures, and so can we do that? Write down a suggestion.
I think different conversations as well, you know, because I mean, what art needs is like, needs to be mixed with different things, you know. That's what I also agree with Adrian. It's not, I cannot make theater just because of theater. I cannot just sit down and think about 100 years of theater behind me and try to do the same and a little bit more funky and twist a little bit a version of Ibsen's Old House, you know, because I don't, or things like that, you know, which just keep on happening over and over and over and over, you know. And also the city theater is not the city theater anywhere. It's not representative to the people. I mean, in Berlin, a little bit more than in other cities, but if you go like to other cities in Germany, where is the city theater? White people only, you know, whereas like cities which have complete diversity. Like that's what I saw in Düsseldorf. I said like, wow, I feel really, actually, after doing this piece there, I was thinking, what am I working? This is a city theater because I go out and it's a huge Japanese community, it's a huge African community from Ghana, and there is not one single person who is Asian or black in the ensemble. That's crazy. So these things need to change, you know. If we want to have any conversation about anything, society has to change art, you know. And this is something that is you know, we don't need more art of the same. We're doing that for ages.
I think there's a number of ways we can fund it. I mean, there's a lot of big companies moving here. We should, you know, I'm the last person to suggest taxes, but, you know, if we're going to talk about redistributing money, let's redistribute it in a way that makes sense to us. So we either give these big companies a chance to set up something easier than foundations and fund artists directly. For those who prefer that the government decides who the money goes to, which always leads to friendships and relationships and weird sort of lobbying channels, but whatever. I think maybe people should, instead of a Kirchensteuer, a church tax, pay a Kunststeuer. I'd be perfectly happy to see that happen. I think there's so many ways. I think we should also maybe, if we have the, I don't know how to do it in English, but if you tax the companies based on the number of employees that they have here, because we have all these big tech companies coming here who are setting up. Amazon is coming with 4,000 people. Google is coming with 3,000 people. Tesla is coming with several thousand people. Facebook has them, blah, blah, blah. Let's keep some of that money here. Let's make sure we keep it here, and let's use it for cultural use.
I think nobody would oppose the idea of taxing for cultural things, but
the church
I think
might.
there would be a lot of people who would fight you on it.
I think what Adrian Göhler and Constantin Makras was up to was to change the way we think, and one of the most important aspect is time. And if we change, like the period, we don't want to get more money to produce more in less time, but we want to have time and space in order to rethink what we are doing. That's what the point was. And just take this ensemble as an example, St. Agnes. If it was an asset of the Senate, it has been sold and transformed in anything else, but this is part of the assets of the Catholic Church, which usually doesn't sell its assets, but give it as a Erbpacht. This is also an Erbpacht, so a kind of lease system. So by doing so, you find a new way of dealing with time, of changing needs, and also by separating the use value from the property, you can change the whole system. So this space maybe would have not been possible today if it was sold a few years ago. It is a tiny piece with its own problems, but it's still a free space where we can have this kind of conversations. And I think if we want to find new solutions, then we have to rethink what you said earlier, not in this binary way, but rethink like aspect of time. And this is what we did with rethinking the idea of a commoning. So this doesn't belong to anybody, not the state and not private persons, but a group of persons who bring themselves into a process of taking care of the resources of the urban environment.
I love the idea. Moritz, you...
Yeah, and another thing, when we are talking about what we need more, maybe instead of the duty of taxes or something, we need more cooperation. Sometimes I think that is our business, because we are working always with cooperation. All the kinds, like this Art Week, it's a big joint venture between the biggest one and the smallest one, the unexpected one, and it's not a kind of solidarity from the big one and the successful, but it's a win-win situation. And actually, this is the same thing. Instead, maybe in a tax, you need a kind of duty for cooperation, also with entrepreneurs, with new companies, and then you have a kind of partnership. And this is, I think, this is necessary.
I agree with you. We know corporations, and they will not just give money. So they need some kind of tax deduction or some kind of positive consideration. So we have to figure out a way to make sure that they are credited both in name and financially for the efforts that they contribute back into the community.
Yes, and it's the same thing between all the players. So you need the cooperation with like the participation and the outreach programs. You have to go out, but you have the cooperation between the institutions, the artists, the cultural makers, the institutions, and the museums. So sometimes, especially in the art, it is always exclusion. We don't, and this is a new effect of the coronavirus now, because actually this Art Week it's the biggest cooperation since the last years, because everybody overcome his fear for cooperation, for joint venture. It's a festival of togetherness. And if from the club like the Berghain with the Bose Foundation, with the artists, and actually this is also a result of the Lab of Berlin.
Yeah, thank you. I hear this trust in taking cultural tax and hoping that this will help something. I'm not so confident about that, because I think the state is not the best entrepreneur and certainly not the better artist. And if you see the government of this city at this time, you have sometimes the impression that they are following a Deattraktivierungsstrategy, so a strategy to make the city less attractive, to attract less tourists, less investors, and so that their voters have their peace and their rents and so on. So I'm not so much convinced about giving too much money into the hand of the state. They are not the better artists. I have another hopeful thought about the future. We're always talking about artists, culture needs locations. And they are too expensive nowadays. And I mean, the printing money by the central banks has also helped to create a asset bubble in the real estate market, and so this is a very bad development. But think about Amazon. Think about all the online shopping. So there will be so many retail places in town, they will be empty someday. Think about the coronavirus and the home office. Think about all these people who will not go to offices anymore, that work from their home. So we will have so many business spaces free in the future, in a few years. And this can be filled by something new. Don't be afraid. Don't think about my little bookshop and Amazon. So there's also a good outcome from that. And then these spaces will be filled by restaurants, by culture, and the prices will fall. And that's my prospect for the future.
Brandl should redesign those spaces, please.
Yeah, someone should demolish.
I'm not so sure about that because, while it was like very fast during the pandemic lockdown, you turn around and then you realize that half of the city was sold in that time, and from really weird people that for me, the problem is when it's sold to these groups that you don't know who they are, and then when you ask who's the owner, they tell you, we cannot tell you. That's like really, that's what happened to the building where I have my studio, and we have a new Hausverwaltung, and I'm asking, okay, I would like to make the Eigentümer. No, who is the owner? We can't tell you. That sounds so creepy. I have fantasies. I start to see traffic web, cleaning money of the most obscure things in the world, by weird groups of people who doesn't even know which they own, where, basically, because this is a situation that happens in many parts of the world. So this happened a lot during the lockdown. You turn around and, Kish & Co. is going crazy. It wasn't like, it was not about the little bookstores. That I don't feel it's better people get in those buildings, especially when it's this weird anonymous groups that they have weird names like Beta 1, Beta 2 or something, And they are like in all, I don't know if you know the Paradise in Sosen there, that they have this, that there is a place in Brandenburg, a small village, that they have a tax exemption, so they pay less tax for property. There's 1,500 companies in Sosen, Brandenburg, for 22,000 inhabitants. And it's like the Cayman Islands of the Immobilienmarkt in Berlin. Basically, they all buy in Berlin. It's kind of weird, all thing, So I don't know.
But I like very much the Catholic Church element, and also your question how we can maybe invent just here another way of financing and dealing with cooperation. Cooperation is something that actually connects to Gaia. And I know that Gaia, the reception of Gaia was very esoteric, but actually the source, the invention was very scientific. And Lynn Margulis, that came up with the symbiotic planet, showed us that basically all the neo-Darwinistic take on evolution theory was totally wrong, because it's not about random mutation and then natural selection and competition. It's about cooperation and symbiosis. So organisms are created for a symbiotic cooperation, and suddenly you have a new organism. And this is something, we modeled our society on the wrong premises that we learned from a wrong take of science on the reality. And the reality is that we develop, for exactly what you said, through cooperation, like this Berlin Gallery weekend. And I think that's a power that is maybe not, the poor but sexy thing. It's a little bit related to this, because if you are poor, you need to cooperate, If you have all the resources, you can be all alone in your big and expensive apartment with your Rothko. But the problem is that when Corona hits, these apartments will stay empty. They won't, they won't be sold, So we will create a city like Hamburg, where in the inner city you have basically only empty apartments, and the moment the shops are closing down, the city is completely empty, and this is very, very sad. So this kind of, I very much liked what you said, that we gained through the free space.
We should change the slogan poor, and therefore we need solidarity, kind of. So we have to
Sex and solidarity.
That's like a slippery slope. I don't know.
I mean, okay, sex is, a very elemental form of cooperation, right?
I come back to the Catholic Church, because the Berlin Senate is even more Catholic than the Catholic Church. So I'm struggling for a cooperation, which is very hard job. I come back to Tempelhof, because this is the nightmare of. It's a truffle, but it's also a nightmare how it is considered. So I want that there is some 2 or 3 hangars that are developed not by the Senate, but and they will give not more than 30 years. I mean, they even thought maybe 15 is enough. And then you say, who will invest 15 years and then say, okay, now I go back? That is really, that is...
But that's totally true. This is what Anlin said. That's totally true. It's possible because if you decouple the property ownership from the operational income, you can earn a lot of money in 30 years. I mean, a lot of money that will justify a lot of investments. And I think that's maybe the way of the Catholic Church to go forward.
We try to cope with the new model of Catholic Church, right? Okay.
Because actually you are totally right that the Catholic Church is not a public property that is administered by the state, but it's also not private. So it's a way that maybe we can, I mean, it worked for many thousand years, 2000, it developed, and it's something that we can model on. I also like your project, Freyo. Maybe you say some words about it, because it's basically a public-private partnership that is connecting resources from the public with the creativity from the private, and I think that's the right way to distribute them.
I mean, so far it's rather the public side of things, I would say, because it's the Federal Ministry for Environment that mainly funds it. But as we have Architect on board, this National Academy for Science Technology, they are closely connected to the research industry and innovation industry, and so hopefully some corporate people may sometimes understand what we're doing, but maybe they won't, so we'll see about that. So I wouldn't call it a public-private partnership yet. I mean, in our case, it's really about, as it's, we live in this artificial biotope. Through this public funding, we can actually leave all those conceptual questions to the creators themselves. So they decide what question to ask, how to work on it, what material to use, and what format to fulfill afterwards. And so this is what we call the prototypical or prototyping method. We never ask where will you land or what will be the result, but only where will you start or what is your first question. And this is, of course, luxurious in some ways, and it's very German in some ways, because I would still say that in general, all these different levels of art producing, I mean art in a very broad sense now, of course, are really something quite remarkable. I absolutely agree that there's too much pressure and hectic and something involved that has nothing to do with the arts themselves, but rather with administration and fear and bureaucracy. So, but I think the fact that Germany has all these different channels and levels and kind of habitats for creators is really remarkable and still kind of working. I mean, it could be better and could be more focused and slower and leave more time to develop. But it's still there. So I'm also kind of optimistic, I must say. I mean, one practical question. I mean, Genossenschaft is really something interesting for Berlin, isn't it? I mean, and it's already happening, of course, and becoming more and more important.
That's a very good. I think Genossenschaft is very good. I would like to ask the audience if somebody has a question, then please also feel free to ask it. And while you may think it through, I would like to ask every panelist to say what would be your sentence for the mission for Berlin for the future, looking from today.
We want to win, and we want to be the winners in the future, and the way to win is, and we do it together. And so it's a plaidoyer for more cooperation, overcome the fear, for nearness, and for let's make more together.
Thank you very much.
Stay sexy.
And Pur?
I don't know, it's a lot. Well, luckily, I mean, I got to keep on putting an accent on a real, not in real diversity, but not like from the just I'm saying it, but from like the daily practice. You know that certain things become a daily practice in arts, and also like how people think about art and how they think about the city and how they think about also corporations. Also, think is very important, but between everything, between the arts and science, and that there is a more fluid highway between those sectors. I mean, yeah.
Actually, I'm struggling for a fund for aesthetics and sustainability in the national parliament. I hope that this comes reality this time, because I also want to open up floors to the art in cooperation with science, because I think we have a major problem with climate, we have a major problem with biodiversity, and I know that there are a lot of artists having a lot of things in their mind, but we don't have the vessels to fund them, because they say, oh no, it's too much art in the environmental side, and vice versa. And this has to be changed. So I'm struggling for different forms of funding. Yeah. Still. Always.
I very much like this attack against victimizing the creatives, and so I would really, I mean, my personal claim would be, rather than solidarity, it's about collaboration. So it's not so like whining and we need help and we are so desperate, but rather because it's fun, it helps thinking, it helps developing interesting things. So these synergies are my hope and actually my expectation.
Well, I think Berlin is still sexy in the sense that species moving to Berlin, still moving to Berlin. Just take the horrible building Alexa we all know at Alexanderplatz, the shopping mall. And on top of the building, there is a roof which is just covered by pebbles, so stones. And seagulls just move there. An entire, how do you say, a group of seagulls who see us just as a natural environment for them to live. And they find good things to eat in the city and around. So that's my perspective for this future of the city, is that when we build our environment, we also build for other species on this world to live with us. And Berlin is one of the most biodiverse cities in Europe. And this could be a new way of looking at the city in order to take our aims and ambitions and interests back a bit in order to get to a new thinking about how we live on this earth.
Well, could many things be said, but I have to be short. I would say that the only stability in our life is instability. So, and we live in constant change, and we don't have to share tears about change. It's part of our life. Accept it. We're getting through this.
Federico.
2 conclusions from me. First conclusion, I've often worried about Berlin. After this discussion, I do not worry about Berlin. Thank you, everyone, for these thoughts, for sharing your thoughts. There were many very, very relevant things that have been said here tonight, and I do not worry anymore about Berlin. Second conclusion, let's cooperate. Yeah, let's include everyone in these cooperations. And maybe I'm the only member of the Catholic Church on this panel. Let's also include the Catholic Church. Thanks.
I'm also a member, and I will go at 7 to church today, actually. This is where we have to finish. And thank you very much, everybody, for being here. It was amazing. Big round of applause, please.